Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Vietnam War. I'm Mike B, and today we're going to be talking about the difference between the North Vietnamese Army, or the NVA, and the Viet Cong, which were formerly the Viet Minh. I'm just going to kind of go through a brief history of each little group and kind of what the differences and obviously similarities were. So to start it off, the Viet Minh were basically all forces who opposed the French occupation of Indochina. And in the 1950s, they had been the same people that were kind of fighting off the Japanese using guerrilla tactics, not in a large scale, but large enough to make an impact and have them be known. Then they fought the French in the 1950s and basically got the French to say, screw this, it's not worth all the resources and manpower and lives anymore, we're done. And then they ended up leaving in the 1950s. Now, what this did was it created kind of a power vacuum, as any times, a European or any nation's occupying somewhere else, and they have a colony, and then they just up and leave. It creates a power vacuum, which is where you got the North, who believed in communism because they were closer to China and Russia and all that stuff. And Ho Chi Minh actually studied in Russia and got to be a real Marxist communist. He's a Leninist too, and he was the one who was in the North, and there was a line drawn, kind of like with Korea. The North is communist, the South is going to be a republic. And the US didn't like it that much, so we ended up getting involved. Now, because of that split, right, you've got a defined border, which is the demilitarized zone, the DMZ, right, or I-Corps if you watch my core maps. So what this did is said, okay, you're two separate countries. The South did not want them to be two separate countries, nor did the North. It was fairly equal on kind of who wanted it to be a unified country more. It really doesn't matter for the sake of this conversation, but anyway, so the North said, okay, we're going to build an army, like an actual trained force that's professional, wears a uniform, is well equipped, well armed, well supplied, and is going to be our main fighting force against the American, South Vietnamese, mainly South Vietnamese force, Army of the Republic of Vietnam, ARVN forces. And when the US gets involved, that kind of complicates things. So the United States, the Republic of Korea, and South Vietnam, ARVN, Australian forces are all kind of in this area that's South Vietnam, right? And the North Vietnamese said, okay, well, we can't take these guys head on. We can't just plow down through the DMZ. So let's go around to Cambodia, or through Cambodia and Laos. And then there was a whole other subject that I'll be covering in the future when I gotta update my knowledge and research on that particular cluster flop. I don't want to get demonetized by saying naughty words. So anyway, so what happened was the North Vietnamese army was formed, and it remained for the most part in or around North Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. They tried to pop around and flank things. Those are the ones where you're going to see they're kind of a tan uniform. They've got a belt with a communist star on it. They were wearing pith helmets and steel helmets, depending what their unit could get, but a lot of them were pith helmets. And they would be wearing a uniform. They'd be mostly carrying AK-47s or SKSs, so they had a pretty constant supply of Sino-Soviet firearms, Chinese as well. And those are the guys that you're going to see that were professional, like if you watch We Were Soldiers, the Battle of the Ia Valley. Those were North Vietnamese army forces. Now, where you get to the Viet Cong is in South Vietnam, there's really no way for the North Vietnamese army to get down there. Even through Laos or Cambodia, they figured it out pretty quick and stopped them there. Now, what this did is, for all the people that could infiltrate and were also sympathizers to the North's movement, communism, who were in South Vietnam, they became the Viet Cong. Now, these people were basically a hardcore militia. They were very good, extremely good at guerrilla warfare, recruiting people, transporting supplies, sabotage, espionage, you name it. These were kind of the people that were hiding in plain sight. These were the people that most of the Vietnam vets that I talked to were very scared of. These were the guys that would smile at you during the day, cut your hair, and then sneak in through the wire and try to blow up your ammo dump or blow you up, set traps and stuff like that. And they would set traps where they knew the Americans would patrol, where there weren't any North Vietnamese forces. So the Viet Cong were very, very good at terrorizing U.S. and other countries' forces. These are the guys that, again, it's like a hardcore militia, but here's the problem though. Because they didn't have a steady, constant stream of supplies, they had to rely a lot on captured weapons, old weapons, homemade weapons, and faulty ammunition, and they had to store things in really humid environments, so if they store something for a month and go and try and retrieve like a rifle or something, it's probably going to be rusted and it's going to require some maintenance, so you can't just grab it and go. That being said, the Viet Cong was extremely effective against forces in the south. There were some North Vietnamese forces that made it down there, like in Tet 68 and stuff. That was an ordeal. But mainly the Viet Cong were the ones who would appear out of nowhere, and they'd vanish, and they used tunnels a lot. It's an insane thing. Now, these guys are basically going to be wearing no standardized uniform. They're going to be piecing together like any militia. They're going to be piecing together equipment that they've captured. They're going to be wearing their civilian clothes more than likely. If they could acquire some military gear and equipment. See a lot of pictures of both male and female Viet Cong soldiers wearing U.S. boonie hats and stuff like that, and U.S. helmets or ARVN helmets that they just took the covers off of. And you see a lot of them wearing captured stuff and using captured weapons. So that's how they kind of sustained, and they wreaked havoc on the forces in the south. They weren't, from what I've heard and researched, they weren't as good in a straight-on firefight because they didn't have that hardcore disciplined training and drill and muscle memory. So they would just rely on hit and run, like actual guerrilla warfare tactics, whereas the North Vietnamese army, it's like, okay, this is our army, we know what we're doing, we've got all the weapons, we're gonna fuck your day up pretty bad. Whereas the Viet Cong were more of like the deception and the traps and the just terrorizing people. Like, I mean, hey, if your country gets invaded and you think people are invading you, which it kind of was, I'd be doing the same thing. So I don't fault them for doing that. It sucks that Americans and Australians and South Koreans and everybody died, and South Vietnamese died because it's a war. But when you get past the whole emotional part, it's a very effective way to beat a far superior force. If you're not going to win in a straight up fight, do everything in your power to just absolutely sabotage, terrorize, demoralize, and yeah, in a war, kill your enemy. So that was kind of the main difference in the fighting styles and just kind of the supplies and the uniforms and whatever of the North Vietnamese Army, or NVA, and the People's Army of Vietnam, Viet Cong, PAVN, NLF, National Liberation Front. Basically, when I say that, Viet Cong means all of those movements and groups kind of encompassed into one. That's what we called them, and a lot of the Vietnamese called them that. So, yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you got any questions, I'll try to answer. I'm not a super expert on the actual details and the history of how these groups got formed and why. I just know the overview, which is kind of what I'm giving you today. And yeah, let me know what you think. Please subscribe to the channel and consider supporting my work on Patreon. This is a viewer-funded channel now, because I can no longer afford to buy ammo and stuff after I kind of went broke this year doing that for YouTube videos. But that's something that I really appreciate if you just consider supporting. It's $1 a month, buys you in. I post exclusive content on there. I'm going to be posting some really cool videos pretty soon. There's a lot of interaction on Patreon. So anyway, go there and check that out. And if not, that's fine too. But I appreciate you watching, and we'll see you on the next video.